It begins with someone saying that reincarnation is like spinning a roulette wheel. You could end up reborn as an animal or even as a cockroach scuttling on the ground. So, if you're lucky enough to be reborn as a human again, it's like you've essentially beaten the odds. But to cut to the chase, our protagonist was indeed lucky enough to survive the game of chance, and the spinning roulette chose him to be human again. However, it's said that in his previous life, he literally worked himself to death, and it seemed things were promising for him so far. But the body he was reincarnated into belonged to an extra in a dark, depressing novel he used to enjoy. The character is a one-time villain who gets killed off in the first chapter. The hopeless troublemaker Han Siha. As he reflects on this with a disappointed look, the panel reveals that Han Siha is a talented but lazy young man interested in black magic, which eventually leads to his tragic end when he discovers that it's taboo. He also has a petty personality, unable to overcome his greed, and eventually dies as an extra character. Additionally, his abilities seem unpromising, so there's no need to dwell on that. Instead, let's focus on the real situation of our protagonist, who now finds himself in a problematic position, cursing the spinning wheel for making him possess someone like that, demanding that if he had free will to choose, he would at least pick someone promising like a hero or someone handsome. Kidding aside, our protagonist was worried that this situation would bring him trouble. He lamented that possessing a one-time villain was bad enough, but doing so in such a dire situation made it even worse. The current setting was an auxiliary facility for dark mages, and Han Siha, who once had high expectations due to his natural magical potential, had been briefly acknowledged, but ended up being ostracized at the academy because of his lack of real-world skills. It seems that Han Siha had come here to join the dark magic organization. Now, as he stood there, these mysterious people were facing him, but they seemed to be ignoring him. One of them asked who he might be, and another responded that it was just a kid begging to join their organization. They also mentioned that the boy was a student at Ardell Academy. This gave one of the men a bold idea. He looked at the boy with an evil glint in his eye, saying that if he was a student of Ardell Academy, he might be useful to them. He then told him to come and follow them. Hearing this, our protagonist began to panic, sweating as he debated whether to follow or not. However, he had no choice. He couldn't defeat them, so he agreed and followed them. As they walked, one of the men asked him if he knew the procedure for joining. Our protagonist replied that of course he did, all the while thinking that once he drew the blood of a member and swore an oath to dark magic, he could never leave the place. How could he not know about it? He also remembered that the dark mage organization Han Siha, or rather, he, since he now possessed Han Siha, was about to join, was a cliched evil force that would ultimately be destroyed by the protagonist of the novel he had read. That if he went through with the dark mage contract, he would be killed by the protagonist too. So, he thought, instead of following those guys, he needed to figure out how to escape from this death trap right away. As he was worrying, he suddenly stopped for a moment because a notification appeared, a system prompt synchronizing with Han Siha's perspective. As the synchronization loaded and finally completed, the system warned him to escape. Our protagonist was shocked by the sudden appearance of what seemed like a cheat code out of nowhere. It appeared his luck was still strong. But as he saw the warning on the screen, he was stunned for a moment. At that time, a loud voice echoed through the area, like the creepy scream of someone being tortured. This made him even more nervous. One of the men asked his companion about the sound they had heard, wondering if something had happened in the basement. As the man started to go check what was happening, he turned to our protagonist and threatened him, saying that if he tried to flee, he would be dead for sure. He advised him not to move from his spot if he valued his life. Our protagonist replied that he understood. So, without further ado, those guys rushed off to check what was happening, leaving our protagonist behind. Taking advantage of the timing, he realized he had a chance to escape. Once he was sure they were gone, he started to run, holding his breath. He kept running, but he had no idea where the exit was. Exhausted, he stopped for a moment to think, muttering to himself that he was running around like a lunatic without knowing where the exit was. As he paused, he noticed a locked door in front of him and saw some light getting closer, making him wonder if it was the right direction. But this was just speculation on his part. So, before he could act, a sudden voice startled him. It seemed that a member of the dark magic group was passing by, so he rushed to hide. As he listened, two men were talking about a kid who had escaped from their third basement floor. It became clear they were referring to him. Hearing this, he felt a surge of panic, worried that if they found him, he would be dead for sure. As the two men walked away, they also mentioned that the boy was a student of Ardell Academy, and they suspected he was a spy. Once they were far enough away, he checked his surroundings to ensure it was safe. After making sure no one else was nearby, he rushed to open the door in front of him, but it was locked. He tried desperately to force it open, even though he knew it wouldn't work. In the end, he failed and felt hopeless as he couldn't budge the door at all. Desperate, he thought of a solution, realizing that in his situation, the only thing he could rely on was his memory. Even though Han Siha was worthless, he had to think of something. He cursed under his breath as he considered his options, and saying that Han Siha had no talent for white magic, but he was born with magic power within his body. However, with such an uncontrollable amount of magic power, he couldn't even figure out which goalpost he was aiming for. In other words, he just needed to control his magic power and concentrate. Focusing intently, he managed to direct the magic power flow into his fingertips. He placed his hand on the lock in front of him and released all of it, hoping to open the door. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and he felt even more exhausted than from running. As he caught his breath, he muttered that his skill was not good enough yet, and that he had a long way to go. Suddenly, he sensed a figure in the dark behind him. It seemed to be a beast moving towards him, each step exuding a domineering aura. Its eyes glowed as it stared at him. Realizing that something was approaching, our protagonist turned around, thinking that this was the end. But to his surprise, he saw a beast, specifically a little dragon, roaring at him. Instead of being scared, he was amazed to see a cute little dragon roaring in an adorably high-pitched tone. The dragon approached him and grabbed his robe, indicating that it wanted to be picked up. Perplexed, our protagonist picked up the dragon, wondering why such a creature had made its way to this place and why it was so friendly towards him. Pondering this, he told the dragon coldly and directly that he couldn't take it with him, explaining that it was hard enough to manage himself. After all, would he really be able to care for it? However, upon hearing this, the little dragon was shocked and couldn't believe it. So, the little dragon started acting out and crying like an innocent baby. But our protagonist, with a cold-hearted resolve, tried to quiet it down. However, the cute little dragon was not so easily silenced and continued making noise. With no other choice, our protagonist reluctantly decided to let it be and took it along with him. As he ran, feeling frustrated, he muttered that the little dragon was doing it on purpose. In his mind, he knew he couldn't adopt something he couldn't be responsible for. But then, he suddenly stopped and realized that, since it had come to this, maybe he should try using the dragon's power. As he looked at the dragon, thinking about this, his system suddenly popped up, informing him that his taming ability had been unlocked and asking if he wished to tame the little dragon. The system identified the creature as a suspicious hatchling and displayed its abilities. It was a level 2 with a magic power of 50, along with strength, agility, and intelligence stats. It also had a flamethrower skill at level 1. Seeing this, our protagonist was surprised and somewhat confused. What frustrated him even more was that there was no accept button on the system. He realized he would need to tame the dragon hands-on. He thought to himself, "Boy, don't push your luck too far." Anyway, as he realized it, he remarked that when it comes to taming, he actually has quite a bit of experience and talent. He boasted about his technique, using a few gestures to offer reassurance and build trust. He then told the little dragon to trust him, looking at it with a serious expression. However, deep inside, he worried whether he was doing it correctly. Thankfully, the little dragon seemed to accept him as its contractor, floating into the air and releasing a glowing light, indicating that the taming was successful. As the dragon descended, our protagonist wondered if he had truly succeeded in taming it, though he expected there might be more to it. Cutting off his thoughts, he decided to check for himself and commanded his new pet, addressing it as Reptile, to complete its first task, breaking the lock on the door. The cute reptile moved forward, its eyes glowing, then jumped and bit the chain lock, breaking it instantly. Our protagonist was shocked, not expecting it to break so easily. With the lock broken, it seemed they could now escape. He praised the dragon, saying it did a good job, feeling happy that they might make it out alive. But suddenly, footsteps approached, giving him a bad feeling. As he looked back, the men spotted him and sneered, calling him a rat and saying that if they caught him, they would roast him alive. Panicking after being discovered, our protagonist found himself paralyzed with fear, wondering what he should do. Forcing himself to think, he realized the men were getting closer. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. He remembered a spell called Smog, the first self-defense spell taught at the academy. It was a basic spell that created smoke for concealment, and it was so simple that even someone with no magical talent could learn it. Although he knew the spell, he had never actually used it before. But in this situation, he had no choice but to try. Without further delay, he steadied his breath and focused his energy on his fingertips, imagining he was holding a gun. To his relief, it worked. As a light started to form at his fingertips, the men stopped in their tracks. Our protagonist quickly cast the spell, creating a cloud of smoke around them. Amazed and happy that his spell had worked, he used the distraction to flee and approached the door. Just as he started to open it, a sudden spirit hand appeared, grabbing him by the neck. He was shocked, unable to breathe as the hand choked him, and he collapsed to the ground. His cute reptile companion rushed to his side, while he wondered if this was the end. The man who cast the demonic spell sneered, saying that the boy couldn't escape as he pleased, and that at least his death would be painless, so he should be grateful for not feeling any pain. But the man was sweating and seemed worried about something. His companion was nowhere to be seen, and it appeared that the spell he cast had consumed a large amount of his mana. As our protagonist lay there, feeling hopeless, he realized just how dire his situation had become. As he thought about how unfair it was to be reborn only to die again, he desperately tried to think of a way to break free from the spell, even as he struggled to breathe. Just when things seemed hopeless, he remembered he had one more card to play, his pet reptile. The little dragon, sensing his distress, clung to his robe, worried. Our protagonist, struggling for breath, told the dragon that if it really wanted to get out of there, it needed to listen to him. Apologizing for controlling it with his lousy skills, he looked into the dragon's eyes with determination and asked if it could lend him a hand. The cute reptile opened its wings and approached the spellcaster with a domineering aura, releasing a powerful flamethrower. The flames enveloped the man, who screamed in pain and confusion, shocked by the sudden appearance of such a powerful beast. He hadn't expected that our boy would have such a formidable companion. Meanwhile, the spirit hand around our protagonist's neck vanished, freeing him. As he caught his breath, the little dragon watched the man burn, ensuring the threat was eliminated. Once the danger had passed, the dragon returned to our protagonist, roaring as if to ask if he was okay. Our protagonist didn't quite expect things to turn out this way, but he was grateful to have a trustworthy pet to rely on. Smiling, he was surprised when the cute reptile jumped on him, and the two shared a comforting moment. It felt refreshing. As they enjoyed the brief respite, our protagonist told the little dragon that he owed it his life and promised to take care of it. But first, they needed to get out of there. The scene shifted to an hour later. They were now venturing through a desert, seeking refuge in a cave. As they walked, putting distance between themselves and the dark mages, our protagonist began to feel a bit relieved. However, the heat of the sun was exhausting, and he became increasingly thirsty. The little reptile was also worn out and thirsty. He vowed to himself that he would never allow himself to be caught by those dark mages again, knowing it would surely mean death. Not far away, he spotted a carriage and approached it, asking the old driver if they could possibly get a ride. The old man asked if he had money to pay for the ride. Without hesitation, our protagonist checked his robe pocket and found a gold card. Showing it to the old man, he asked if it would be enough to get them a ride. The old man was shocked upon seeing the card, recognizing it as one provided by Ardell Academy, a card that conferred certain privileges. After reconsidering, the old man eventually agreed to let them in. Grateful, they thanked him and took their seats in the carriage. As they settled in, the old man asked where they were headed. Our protagonist hesitated, realizing that he had rushed out without a plan. But knowing that the dark mages might soon be on his trail, and that they would kill him to prevent any information from leaking, he had no choice but to go to the one place where people might still want him dead. It was also the safest place he could think of to hide, for the time being. Ardell Academy, as mentioned in the novel he had read. So, our boy's new journey began. At Ardell Academy, a girl rushed to enter the building. She was Selene, a second-year assistant professor, who was impressed by the Academy's luxurious marble floors and elegant chandeliers. She remarked on how even the students' uniforms exuded an air of refinement. As she waved to the students, her gaze suddenly faltered when she saw a ghostly figure. The sight was startling, as our boy emerged from an old and dusty carriage. Surrounded by dust, he stepped out with a dusty robe and weary expression. Selene couldn't believe her eyes and nearly collapsed, horrified at the sight of someone so unkempt entering their pristine academy. She wondered how a student like him had ended up there, and looked down at him with disdain. Our boy, now feeling refreshed by the fresh air, was oblivious to the professor's reaction. Selene was concerned that this boy, Han Siha, might tarnish the academy's reputation on the very first day of the semester. She recalled that Han Siha was someone who had nearly failed due to his inability to control his innate magical talent. Meanwhile, our boy kept his cute reptile hidden inside his robe, though the dragon was restless and demanded to be freed. Noticing the frantic professor, our boy checked her out and deduced that she must be a professor, given her appearance and behavior. That's why he approached her and asked if he was late. She confirmed that he was. As she looked him up and down, she dismissed him, saying he was not worthy of such attention. She added that she didn't have time to worry about a failure with no potential, and suggested he wasn't worth her bother. She recalled the rumors about him being creepy, with an interest in black magic, and the stories about him being a lunatic who hugged a voodoo doll every night. She believed that getting involved with him would bring nothing but trouble. Tapping his shoulder, she urged him to hurry inside. Our boy thanked her appreciatively, showing a soft, bright smile. The positive vibe he gave off left her stunned and shocked. As she observed him entering, she noted that, as a second-year professor, her perspective had changed. She watched him thoughtfully as he went inside. Now, inside the room, our boy seemed to attract attention from his classmates, who murmured and gossiped about him. They labeled him as creepy and discussed his recent entrance, noting that he arrived by carriage and appeared poor. They looked down on him and criticized his behavior. Our boy ignored the chatter, staying calm and reflecting that he was likely doomed to be a minor, crazed villain character. Sitting alone in the back, he overheard his classmates speculating that he must have advanced due to some sort of favor from a professor. He wondered if his family had bribed someone for his advancement, if a professor had recognized his potential, or if a magic tower had written him a recommendation. He decided that for now, his priority was to figure out how to survive in this dark fantasy novel using his own strength. He broke down his survival goals into two main objectives. First, he needed to survive in a quiet place. But since he hadn't found that yet, he didn't need to worry about it immediately. As a third-rate villain known for being violent and incompetent, he faced the risk of a gruesome end, being buried alive by the protagonist. Concerned, he noted that the Academy's closure for the year meant he had some time, though the exact reason for his character's death was still unclear. It could be due to unresolved loose ends or other crimes he was unaware of. Determined to avoid a similar fate, he resolved to live quietly and cautiously. He preferred to die working hard, rather than being buried alive. His second plan was to graduate safely. By adapting and making a life in this new world, he aimed to secure his future. Though his family was wealthy, they had disowned him due to his past behavior. Therefore, obtaining his diploma would be a reliable way to ensure a stable future and make a living. He decided that instead of getting involved with the protagonist and risking his own demise, he would rather live quietly as an ordinary student. He resolved to do his best to block every scenario that could lead to his end. When their professor arrived, everyone greeted him. The students murmured about the intense aura the professor exuded. Our boy recognized him as Professor Grint from the magic department. While he was relaxing, his classmates expressed concern that their exams this semester would be difficult, commenting on how intimidating the professor was. Professor Grint silenced them, acknowledging that the students who advanced to the second year were quite impressive. He mentioned that he had noticed some students who stood out. Our boy agreed, noting that the presence of promising students, including the protagonist, raised the overall quality of the academy. He remarked that this made the conditions quite unfavorable for him, as the rules felt like a Jeopardy game. He noted that Ardell Academy accepted students aged 14 to 19 and was known for its rigorous curriculum. Thanks to its promising students winning competitions, the academy had become more like a competitive arena. However, only about 10% of students managed to graduate with high honors, which he found daunting. Given the intense competition, he wondered how he could possibly compete with the protagonist. He remembered that in the original plot, the protagonist rapidly grew his power within the black magic organization. Since he planned to live quietly, this seemed nearly impossible. At that moment, Professor Grint announced that many students did not meet the required standards, and those lacking skills would not be allowed to join his class. Our boy was shocked, feeling as if he had received a harsh blow, and the professor seemed to be referring to him with a serious look, as if scrutinizing him. After announcing the opening exam schedule, he tapped the ground with his walking stick, causing a display announcement illusion to appear before them. Our boy was stunned, his expression reflecting amazement. He remarked that the spell was unbelievable, noting the sophisticated level of the illusion. The display showed that based on his experience over the past year, he needed to freely choose 3 subjects and take both written and practical exams for those subjects. He was impressed by the top-notch magic used by the academy, but realized that being able to choose the exam subjects freely could be advantageous. However, he suspected that it wouldn't be that easy, and wondered if there might be a twist. The professor announced that he would personally draw the balls containing the students' names from a box to determine the order. Our boy thought to himself that relying on luck for the exam was unfortunate, feeling as if fate was playing a joke on him. Given his current lack of knowledge about magic, his only option was to pick subjects early to manage his grades. He felt that his luck had already been used up escaping the dark magicians and wondered what to do next. Meanwhile, the professor drew a ball from the box and announced that the first person to choose their subjects would be Han Siha. Our boy was surprised and somewhat relieved to have the first pick, feeling that his luck hadn't completely run out. He began to look at the available subjects and realized that, since he was not very familiar with magic, he needed to avoid practical-oriented subjects and anything related to necromancy, as mentioned in the story. However, as he reviewed the subjects, he found that all of them seemed difficult and struggled to choose a suitable one. Finally, he found one subject that seemed manageable: exploration of arithmetic and magic formulas. Though he initially thought the name sounded incredibly difficult, he decided it was the easiest option available. He also considered that he was good at memorization, so he could manage it somehow. His peers discussed his choice, noting that the arithmetic subject was the easiest among the options, and they were relieved that he picked it, as they were struggling with it. As the conversation continued, our boy quickly chose his remaining 2 subjects. He noticed that one of them seemed doable. The scene shifted to the library, where he was studying quietly. He reflected that, before coming to this world, he had worked as an intern veterinarian, and the subjects he chose were somewhat similar to his major in veterinary science. He decided to focus first on exploration of arithmetic and magic formulas, acknowledging that while the arithmetic methods were unique to this world, he might not be able to apply his known math formulas effectively. After finishing his studies, he moved on to a book called Monster Anatomy, an introduction to basic taming and behavioral science. While focusing on his studies, he forgot about his pet inside his bag. Other students passing by grew suspicious and curious about the moving bag. It became a bit troublesome for him to ignore, especially since his cute reptile wanted to come out. He pushed the reptile back into the bag to prevent it from drawing attention due to its appearance. Although his pet wanted to come out and play, our boy decided to keep it hidden to avoid causing a scene. He thought that bringing his pet might be useful, but it only created more trouble. With too many eyes around, he had no choice but to leave the library. He realized that, as Han Siha, who struggled with magic control, taming a dragon hatchling could cause suspicion and attract unwanted attention. He promised himself to be more cautious in the future. After leaving the library, he went to the underground training area of the academy. There, he told his cute reptile that it could run freely and behave like a wild beast, as the area was a safe place for it. He thought that since he had managed to grasp the theory to some extent, it would be a good opportunity to practice his taming skills. Now, he was asking the staff member managing the training ground for an entry ticket to the beginner practice area. She seemed surprised and looked at his cute reptile, remarking that it was a hatchling. She expressed her amazement that the boy would bring a dragon to the beginner area. As she asked for the name, our boy realized with shock that he hadn't named his pet yet. He asked the reptile what its name was. The cute reptile, scratching its head in confusion, eventually said, "Chime," with a happy reaction. Our boy saw this as a sign to choose a name for his pet, and the reptile seemed to agree. While he was thinking about it, the cute reptile became frustrated with him for not understanding. As he continued to ponder, he suggested names like Drake, Carcharodontosaurus, and even Charizard, thinking they were the coolest names he could come up with. However, the cute reptile, with an intense aura, indicated that if he didn't choose a good name, he would roast him. Seeing this, our boy decided to carefully select a unique and fitting name, ultimately choosing Basilisk. Our boy noticed that the cute reptile liked the name Basilisk, as it brightened up at the sound of it. The girl then registered the name and informed him that the training area could accommodate up to 2 people, mentioning that there was currently 1 person in the other room. After this, she guided them to the weaponry room, explaining that it was a rental service available for students like them. Our boy noted that the weapons there seemed pretty crappy, possibly because they were free. He decided not to be picky, as he wanted to get stronger and should be grateful for whatever he received. He selected a shield and a wand stick. Once prepared, the girl led them to the gate of the beginner practice area. As she opened it, our boy felt a mix of worry, astonishment, and excitement. Inside, he was amazed to find that the place resembled a beautiful garden. As they explored, he spotted a slime and commented that even low-level monsters seemed somewhat kind-hearted. However, he wasn't feeling particularly kind himself. He asked Basil if he saw the slimes, and upon receiving confirmation, he declared that he intended to blow them up. Basil, stunned and shocked by his cold-hearted master's intention, shook in disbelief. But he had no choice. So our cute Basil went there and annihilated those block slimes. While our boy watched Basil, noting that Basil's actions were colder than he had anticipated, and he remarked that the bastard seemed to enjoy playing with those monsters. It appeared that Basil's dragon instincts were awakening, which, given his genes, was natural. He cursed Basil, noting that the one who had been scared earlier was nowhere to be seen now. While Basil was eating them all while he walked around the area, observing that Basil seemed fine, he decided he should practice and improve his skills and abilities too. As he ventured around, he heard the noisy echoes of beasts and suddenly felt an attack. He quickly turned around stunned but thankfully able to react in time and defend himself. It seemed the block slime monsters were seeking revenge, a quick result of his karma. He saw them in groups and realized he couldn't defeat all of them due to his lack of strength. However, with Basil and his strategy, he could annihilate them one by one. At the right moment, Basil finished with the block slimes and came to him. Our boy asked Basil if he had stretched enough, then told him his plan. They needed to try what they had done before. Our cute Basil, responding to the command, attacked and used his flamethrower on the monsters. A powerful burst of destructive force emerged, and the monsters disappeared like dust. It seemed our cute Basil had become even more powerful than before. Because of it, our boy was shocked and hadn't expected his cute Basil to become more powerful. He praised Basil, calling it a promising and excellent job, and said they must keep going, improving their skills, and practicing like crazy. Half a day passed, and they were lying on the ground, exhausted. He remarked that while practicing his magic, he kept switching between taming Basil and casting offensive spells, and now really felt like he might die. Observing his pet, he noticed that Basil was listening to him well. He vowed that when they returned to the dorm, he would feed Basil delicious food. As he said this, our cute Basil was sleeping nearby. Our boy noticed something fighting below and went to check it out. They saw that it was one of the students mentioned by the girl before, who had been training there first. It appeared that his beast was playing around, scooping up mud, while the girl, kneeling in despair, was frustrated because her beast wasn't listening to her. Her face showed anger that seemed ready to explode at any moment. So, this is the end of the video. If you like the story, make sure to comment with your opinion and subscribe for more updates. Thank you.